The Grand Hall of Galactic Academy Station was filled with the most powerful beings in the known universe. Ambassadors from 12 great species stood in groups, their voices echoing off the crystal walls. Servants moved between them, carrying drinks and food from 100 different worlds. Ambassador Vorthkin of the Krelix Empire walked through the crowd. He stood 9 feet tall, and his body was covered in thick gray armor plates that grew from his own skin. His people were warriors. They had conquered star systems before most species learned to make fire. Everyone moved out of his way as he passed. He felt something bump against his leg and looked down with annoyance. A small figure hurried past him, carrying a toolkit almost as big as she was. She wore the simple brown uniform of a maintenance worker. She was human. Vorthkin did not even remember her face a moment later. Humans were everywhere these days, doing the small jobs that no important species wanted to do. They were useful in the way that cleaning machines were useful. You did not notice them unless they stopped working. The human girl was named Mira Chen. She was 22 years old and had worked on this station for 2 years. She knew that the ambassador had not seen her as a person. She was used to it. Mira moved quickly through the crowd, keeping her head down. She had learned long ago that being invisible was a kind of protection. The galaxy ranked species by strength. Physical power, mental abilities, natural weapons. Humans had none of these things. They were small and soft. They could not read minds, or breathe fire, or survive in space without protection. On the Galactic Strength Index, humans ranked near the bottom. But humans were allowed to exist because they were useful. They could fit into small spaces. They could work long hours without complaint. They could learn new skills quickly. So they filled the gaps that other species did not want to fill. Mira reached a service corridor and finally relaxed. The noise of the party faded behind her. She opened a wall panel and began checking the power connections inside. This was her world. Wires and circuits and pipes. She knew this station better than anyone alive. Every corridor, every shortcut, every system. It was not much, but it was hers. Her communicator buzzed. A message from her supervisor told her that the climate system in Section 7 was making strange noises. She closed the panel and started walking. On her way, she passed the quarters of the Maloyan students. The Maloyans were a small species, covered in soft fur, with large eyes that glowed in the dark. They were not warriors. They were artists and musicians. Other species saw them as weak and often treated them badly. Mira heard crying from inside one of the rooms. She stopped and listened. Through the door, she could hear young voices laughing cruelly. She recognized the deep rumble of Krelix students. They were probably tormenting one of the Maloyans again. The door opened and 3 young Krelix walked out, still laughing. They did not notice Mira pressed against the wall. They never noticed humans. When they were gone, Mira quietly entered the room. A small Maloyan sat on the floor, surrounded by torn pieces of paper. His paintings. Someone had destroyed his paintings. The Maloyan looked up with wet eyes. His name was Pip, and Mira had seen him before. He was always alone, always being targeted. Mira did not say anything. She simply knelt down and began gathering the torn pieces. Some of them could be repaired. She worked quickly and quietly, taping the pieces back together as best she could. Pip watched her with confusion. No one had ever helped him before. When she finished, Mira placed the repaired paintings on his desk. She gave him a small smile and left before he could say anything. It was better this way. If anyone knew she'd helped him, it might make things worse for both of them. She continued to Section 7, thinking about her grandmother, the old woman, had died 3 years ago, just before Mira left Earth. She used to say that kindness was the only strength that mattered. Mira was not sure if that was true, but she could not stop herself from trying. In Section 7, she found Desik waiting for her. He was a Valorian, an ancient species known for their wisdom and long lives. Desik was over 400 years old, but he worked as a custodian. His people had fallen from power centuries ago. Now they were almost as invisible as humans. His face was wrinkled like old leather, but his eyes were sharp and kind. Mira smiled at him. He was the closest thing she had to a friend on this station. The climate system problem was simple. A filter was clogged. They worked together in comfortable silence, and when they finished, Desik looked at her with his ancient eyes. He told her that he had seen her earlier, helping the Maloyan boy. He had seen her do this many times. She was always watching, always learning, always helping when no one was looking. He wondered why she hid these things. Mira shrugged. She said it was easier this way. No one expected anything from someone invisible. Desik shook his head slowly. He said that one day she would have to stop hiding. One day the universe would see what she really was. Mira laughed softly. She was just a maintenance worker. There was nothing special about her. Desik did not argue. He simply smiled in that knowing way of his and returned to his work. Mira headed back toward the main section. The party was still going on. Through the windows, she could see the stars shining peacefully. Ships from a dozen worlds were docked at the station. Everything seemed normal, but as she passed a junction box, she noticed something strange. She opened the panel and frowned. Someone had disabled the early warning sensors in this section. The work was careful and deliberate. This was not an accident. Her heart began to beat faster. She reached for her communicator to report the problem. Before she could speak, the lights went out. The floor shook beneath her feet. A terrible sound of tearing metal filled the air. Emergency alarms began to scream. Through a window, Mira saw ships she did not recognize dropping out of hyperspace. They were dark and angular, covered in weapons. Dozens of them. The station shook again as the first weapons hit their targets. Mira pressed herself against the wall, her heart pounding. She did not know who was attacking or why. She only knew that everything had just changed. In the darkness, she heard screaming begin. Nobody noticed the weak girl until the war broadcast. Exposed, everything part to the attack came fast and without mercy. Mira crawled through a maintenance shaft as explosions shook the station around her. Through the metal walls, she could hear weapons, fire, and screaming. The emergency lights cast everything in a red glow. A voice boomed through every speaker on the station. It was deep and cruel, speaking in a language that the universal translators converted instantly. The voice said that this was Warlord Sithx of the Vexery Dominion. It said that this attack was being broadcast live across the galaxy. Every planet, every station, every ship would watch. They would see what happened to those who refused to bow before the Vexery. They would learn that only the strong deserve to exist. Mira felt ice in her stomach. She knew about the Vexery. Everyone did. They were conquerors who believed that weakness was a crime. They destroyed entire civilizations for sport. Now they were here. Through a vent, she could see into the grand hall where the party had been. The beautiful crystal walls were cracked and stained with smoke. Bodies lay on the floor. Vexery. Warriors moved through the chaos, easily twice the size of any Krelix. Their skin was dark red, and their faces were filled with sharp teeth. They carried massive weapons that glowed with deadly energy. Mira watched as Ambassador Vorthkin tried to fight back. He was huge and powerful, a warrior from a warrior species. But the Vexery commander facing him was faster and stronger. In seconds, Vorthkan was on his knees, bleeding from a wound on his head. The cameras were everywhere. Small flying drones captured everything and sent it out to the galaxy. The Vexery wanted everyone to see the great species brought low. They wanted to humiliate them. Mira crawled deeper into the maintenance shaft. Her hands were shaking. Every instinct told her to find a dark corner and hide until this was over. She was small and weak. She had no weapons, no training. Exactly the kind of person the Vexery would crush without a second thought. Then she heard crying. It came from somewhere below her, small voices filled with terror. Children, Mira closed her eyes. She could keep crawling. No one would know. No one would blame her. She was just a human. What could she possibly do? But her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. Being brave did not mean you were not scared. It meant you were scared and did what was right anyway. Mira changed direction. She crawled toward the crying. Through another vent, she saw them. A group of young students trapped in a classroom. The door was sealed, but she could hear Vexery footsteps approaching. There were at least a dozen children inside. And there, huddled in the corner, was Pip. the Maloyan boy she had helped earlier. His large eyes were wide with terror. Mira had maybe 2 minutes before the Vexery reached that door. She looked around frantically. Her mind raced through everything she knew about this section of the station. Power systems, ventilation, fire suppression, emergency protocols. She had memorized all of it. An idea formed. She dropped down from the shaft into an empty corridor. Her fingers flew across a control panel. She rerouted power from the secondary grid, overloading the door mechanism in the corridor ahead. The blast doors slammed shut, blocking the Vexery's path. That bought her maybe 5 minutes. She ran to another panel and activated the fire suppression system in the surrounding corridors. White foam sprayed everywhere, filling the hallways and making it impossible to see. She heard the Vexery roaring in confusion behind the foam. Mira opened a maintenance hatch in the floor of the classroom. The children screamed when she appeared, thinking she was an attacker. But Pip recognized her. His voice was shaking when he told the others to wait. He said he knew her. He said she had helped him before. Mira did not waste time explaining. She told them to follow her and stay quiet. She promised she would get them somewhere safe. One by one, the children climbed down into the maintenance tunnels. Mira guided them through passages that most people did not even know existed. She had walked these tunnels 1,000 times. In the darkness, with enemies all around, her knowledge became power. Behind them, she heard the Vexery breaking through the blocked doors. They were furious. Someone was interfering with their perfect broadcast. The cameras had caught a glimpse of Myra leading the children away. But she was just a small figure in the smoke and chaos. No one watching the broadcast paid attention. She was obviously just a human. Humans were not important. Mira found an empty storage room far from the fighting. She sealed the door and told the children to stay hidden. She would come back for them, she promised. But first she had to see how bad things really were. Pip grabbed her arm. His voice trembled as he asked where she was going. He asked her not to leave them. Mira knelt down to look into his frightened eyes. She told him that there were others who needed help. She told him to be brave for a little while longer. She said that she believed in him. She left before she could change her mind. Moving through the maintenance shafts, Mira gathered information. The situation was worse than she had feared. The Vexery had complete control of the station. The defense systems were destroyed. Communications were blocked. The station's security forces had been defeated in the first 10 minutes, and the Vexery were gathering all survivors in the central atrium through a vent. Mira looked down at the massive open space at the heart of the station. Hundreds of people knelt on the floor with their hands behind their heads. Diplomats, students, workers, soldiers, all of them prisoners. She saw Ambassador Vorthkin, his proud face now bloody and defeated. She saw Lady Eseth of the Sindari, cold and powerful diplomat who had never once looked at Mira. Now Lady Eseth knelt like everyone else. Her silver robes torn and dirty, Warlord Sithek stood on a platform above them all. He was enormous, even for a Vexery. His armor was decorated with the bones of his enemies. He smiled at the cameras surrounding him. He announced that in 1 hour, these prisoners would be executed. The galaxy would watch the leaders of 12 great species die on their knees. This would be the beginning of a new age. The age of the Vexery. The broadcast showed billions of viewers across the galaxy, watching in horror. Mira pressed her hand against the vent cover, her heart pounding. 1 hour. She had 1 hour to do something. But what could one small human possibly do against an army? She did not know. But she knew she had to try. She began to move through the darkness, her mind racing with desperate plans. Nobody noticed the weak girl until the war broadcast exposed everything. Part 3. Across the galaxy. Billions of beings watched the broadcast from Galactic Academy Station. They saw the mighty Brotlo. They saw the Vexery laughing at their prisoners. They saw exactly what Warlord Scythex wanted them to see. But over the next 40 minutes, they began to see something else. Mira Chen moved through the station like a ghost. She was small enough to fit in spaces no Vexery could follow. She knew every system, every shortcut, every weakness in the station's design. And she had a plan. She could not fight the Vexery directly. She was not strong enough to hurt them, and not fast enough to escape them. But she did not need to fight them. She just needed to confuse them. In Section 12, a Vexery squad marched toward a group of survivors they had detected on their scanners. Suddenly, the corridor filled with thick white fog. Coolant from the climate systems poured through the vents, making it impossible to see. The warriors stumbled and crashed into walls. By the time the fog cleared, the survivors were gone. In Section 8, another squad guarded a sealed door. Without warning, the gravity in that corridor shifted. The warriors found themselves floating helplessly in the air, their weapons drifting away from them. A small figure darted past them in the chaos, but they could not reach her. In Section 5, Vexery commanders received urgent reports of enemy forces attacking from multiple directions. They split their troops to respond. But when they arrived, they found nothing. The sensor readings had been false. Someone had hacked into the system and created phantom signals. The broadcast cameras kept recording. They were designed to capture Vexery triumph, but instead they captured confusion. Again and again, a small figure appeared in the footage. A human girl, moving faster than anyone expected, always one step ahead. At first, no one watching paid attention. She was just a human, insignificant. But as the minutes passed, people began to notice. On viewing screens across the galaxy, questions appeared in the comments. Who was that girl? What was she doing? How was she doing it? The answer seemed impossible. One small human was systematically dismantling an invasion force. Mira did not know she was becoming famous. She was too busy trying to stay alive. Her body ached from crawling through tight spaces. Her hands were cut from working with damaged equipment. Sweat soaked her uniform. But she kept moving. She had to reach the central atrium before the executions began. She found Pip waiting exactly where she had left him, guarding the other children. His fur was matted with fear, but he had not run. He had stayed brave, just like she asked. Mira knelt in front of him. She told him she needed his help. There was something only he could do. Pip's eyes went wide. He was terrified. He reminded her that he was weak, that everyone said so. He asked what he could possibly do against the Vexery. Mira shook her head. She said that he was not weak. She said that he had stayed to protect the others when he could have hidden alone. That was braver than anything the Vexery had ever done. She explained her plan. The central atrium was sealed by energy barriers. She could disable them from a control panel inside, but she needed a distraction. Pip's species could produce light from their bodies. If he could draw the guard's attention for just 30 seconds, she could get inside. Pip looked at her for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. They moved together through the maintenance tunnels. Mira guided him to a position near the atrium entrance. Through a vent, they could see 4 Vexery guards standing watch. Myra squeezed Pip's shoulder. She told him he could do this. She believed in him. Pip closed his eyes. His body began to glow. Soft at first, then brighter and brighter. Light poured from his fur in waves of color, filling the corridor with dancing patterns. The Vexery guards turned in surprise. They had never seen anything like this. For precious seconds, they stared in confusion at the beautiful, strange light. Mira ran. She sprinted past the distracted guards and reached the control panel. Her fingers moved faster than she had ever moved before. Entering commands she had memorized years ago, a Vexery spotted her. He was huge, 3 times her size, with arms thick as tree trunks. He laughed when he saw her, a human. This tiny creature was what had been causing them so much trouble. He raised his weapon to strike her down. Mira did not run. She looked him directly in the eyes and pressed one final button. The emergency bulkhead above the warrior slammed down, trapping him in a sealed compartment. His weapon clattered uselessly against the barrier. The energy barriers around the prisoners flickered and died. The broadcast cameras captured everything. Billions of viewers watched a small human girl stand her ground against a monster. They watched her outsmart him without throwing a single punch. The comments exploded. Who was she? How was this possible? Humans were supposed to be weak. In the atrium, the prisoners looked up in confusion. Ambassador Vorthkin was the first to understand. Someone had freed them. Someone had given them a chance. He struggled to his feet, his warrior instincts returning. He shouted for everyone to move, to run, while they still could. The prisoners began to flee. But there were too many Vexeri between them and safety. They needed someone who knew the way. Mira appeared at a side entrance. Her voice was tired but steady as she told them to follow her. She said she knew a way out. Lady Esif stared at her. The Sindari diplomat had never looked at this human before. Now she asked who Mira was. Mira did not have time to explain. She told them to move. She led the fleeing prisoners into the maintenance tunnels. Behind them, she could hear Warlord Sithek screaming in rage. He ordered all his forces to hunt down the human girl. He wanted her brought to him alive. His voice echoed across the broadcast and across the galaxy. Everyone now knew exactly what species had been humiliating the mighty. Vexeri for the past hour, a human, just a human. The impossible had become real. Nobody noticed the weak. Girl Until the War broadcast exposed everything. Part 4. The broadcast had become the most watched event in galactic history. Billions of beings on thousands of worlds stared at their screens, unable to look away. They were no longer watching a Vexeri conquest. They were watching one human girl fight an empire. Mira led the freed prisoners through tunnels that grew darker and narrower with each turn. Her legs burned with exhaustion. Blood dripped from cuts on her hands and arms. Every breath hurt, but she kept moving. Behind her came over 300 beings from a dozen different species. Diplomats who had ruled star systems, warriors who had won legendary battles, scientists who had unlocked the secrets of the universe. All of them followed a small human girl through the darkness. Ambassador. Vorthkin walked close behind Mira. His wounds were severe, but he refused to slow down. He watched the human with new eyes. He remembered bumping into her earlier, not even registering her as a person. Now he felt something he had not felt in decades. Shame. He asked her name. Mira glanced back at him. She told him her name was Mira Chen. Vorthkin repeated it carefully. Mira Chen. He said he would remember that name for the rest of his life. Lady Esith pushed through the crowd to reach them. The Sindari diplomat was cold and proud, but her silver eyes held something that might have been respect. She told Mira that she was injured. She said that she had medical training and could help. Mira tried to refuse. There was no time. Lady Esith did not listen. She tore strips from her expensive robes and wrapped Mira's wounded hands while they walked. She worked quickly and efficiently. When she finished, she told Mira that she had earned this care. Coming from a Sindari, those words meant everything. They reached a large cargo bay near the outer hull of the station. Mira stopped to check her mental map. From here they could reach the emergency shelters in Section 15. The shelters had independent life support and reinforced walls. They could hold out there until help arrived. If help arrived, a proximity alert sounded on her communicator. The Vexeri were closing in from 3 directions. Mira's heart sank. They were trapped. The cargo bay doors burst open. Warlord Scythex himself strode through, surrounded by his elite guard. His red skin gleamed under the lights. His smile showed rows of sharp teeth. The cameras followed him, broadcasting every moment to the galaxy. Scythex looked at the huddled prisoners with contempt. Then his eyes found Mira. He laughed. He declared that this was their great hero, a tiny, pathetic creature from a tiny, pathetic species. He told the watching galaxy to look carefully. He wanted them to see what their so-called champion really was. He walked closer, towering over Mira like a mountain over a pebble. He told her that she had caused him great annoyance. He said that she had ruined his perfect broadcast. But he was grateful in a way. Now he could show the universe something even better than the execution of diplomats. He could show them the death of hope. He offered her a choice. If she knelt before him and begged for mercy, he would let the prisoners live. They would become slaves, but they would survive. If she refused, everyone would die. Every single being in this room would be slaughtered while the galaxy watched. The cargo bay fell silent. Every eye turned to Mira. She could feel her body shaking. She could feel the fear trying to crush her from the inside. Every part of her wanted to kneel, wanted to give up, wanted this nightmare to end. But she thought of her grandmother. She thought of Pip, still out there somewhere, being brave because she had asked him to be. She thought of all the people who had never noticed her, never seen her, and how they were all watching now. Mira stepped forward. Her voice trembled, but it did not break. She asked Scythex if he truly thought strength was about size. She asked if he believed it was about weapons and armor and making others afraid. The warlord's smile flickered. Mira continued. She said that she had watched his strong warriors run from fog. She had seen his fearless soldiers panic when they could not find their allies. She had watched the mighty Vexery stumble and fall because of tricks any child could understand. Her voice grew stronger. She said that the Vexery were not strong. They were just big. They had never faced anyone who was not afraid to stand up to them. Scythex's face twisted with rage. He raised his massive fist to strike her down. Before he could move, Ambassador Vorthkin stepped in front of Mira. His voice was firm as he told Scythex that he would have to go through him first. Lady Tessith moved to stand beside Vorthkin. She said that the galaxy was watching. She said that they were not seeing what the warlord wanted them to see. One by one, the freed prisoners stood up. Wounded warriors, frightened diplomats, young students who had never seen battle. They formed a wall around Mira, facing the Vexery without weapons but without fear. Scythex stared at them in disbelief. He demanded to know why they were protecting this human. He said that she was nothing, that her species was nothing. A young Krellick student spoke up. He said that she had saved his life when she did not have to. A Maloian diplomat added that she had shown more courage than any of them. Vorthkin finished the thought. He said that she had taught them what strength really meant. The cameras captured every word. Across the galaxy, billions watched these powerful beings defend a human girl they had ignored just hours ago. A new alarm sounded. A different tone. Not danger, but hope. The Galactic Defense Fleet had arrived. Emergency response ships were dropping out of hyperspace. Dozens of them. Someone had gotten a signal out. Help was coming, but the fleet was still 20 minutes away. Scythex looked at the sensor readings and smiled coldly. He said that 20 minutes was more than enough time. If he could not have his triumphant broadcast, he would have a massacre instead. He ordered his warriors to kill them all, starting with the human. Nobody.
Out.
Notice the weak girl until the war broadcast exposed everything. Part 5. The Vexery warriors raised their weapons. 300 prisoners prepared to die. Myra's mind raced faster than it ever had before. She could see the engineering console across the cargo bay. She had one last trick, one final, desperate plan. But the console was 50 meters away, through a line of Vexery soldiers. Impossible. Then she heard a familiar voice. Desic stepped out. From behind a stack of cargo containers, the old Valorian custodian was battered and bleeding, but his eyes were clear. He had been hiding here the whole time, waiting for a chance to help. He looked at Mira and smiled. He told her that he had always said she would have to stop hiding someday. He said that he had been right about her. Myra's eyes went wide. She told him to stay back, to stay safe. She could not lose him too. Desic shook his head. He said that he was 400 years old. He had watched species rise and fall. He had seen empires crumble and heroes forgotten. But he had never seen anyone like her. He told her to do what she needed to do. He said he would give her the time. Before Myra could stop him, Desic ran toward the Vexery line. He was old and slow, but he moved with purpose. The warriors turned their weapons toward him, momentarily distracted by this strange old creature rushing at them. Mira ran. She sprinted across the cargo bay, her wounded legs screaming in protest. She heard weapons fire behind her. She heard Desic cry out in pain. But she did not stop. She could not stop. A Vexery warrior spotted her and swung his massive arm to catch her. Mira dove under it, rolling across the floor. Another warrior blocked her path. She slid between his legs before he could react. The broadcast cameras captured everything. Billions of viewers watched a small human girl dodge through giants. Moving with speed and desperation that no one had thought possible, Mira reached the engineering console. Her fingers flew across the controls, entering commands she had memorized years ago. Emergency docking release. Magnetic defense grid. Full power. Outside the station, the massive docking clamps holding the HFY warship released. The ship began to drift away from the station. Inside the cargo bay, every piece of HFY equipment that used magnetic sealing suddenly activated. Their weapons flew from their hands. Their armor locked against the walls and floor. The warriors found themselves pinned in place, unable to move. Warlord Sithx crashed to his knees, his decorated armor pulling him down with irresistible force. He struggled against the invisible chains, but he could not break free. Silence fell over the cargo bay. Mira stood at the console, breathing hard. Her whole body trembled with exhaustion. But she stayed standing. Sithx stared at her with pure hatred. He demanded to know how this was possible. He said that she was nothing. She was weak. Mira walked toward him slowly. Her voice was quiet but clear, and the broadcast carried every word across the galaxy. She said that she was human. Humans did not have claws or fangs or armor. They could not read minds or breathe fire. They were small and soft and easily broken, but they learned. They adapted. They found ways to survive when survival seemed impossible, and they never ever gave up on each other. She told him that this was their strength. This was what he had never understood. Sithx had no answer. The defense fleet arrived minutes later. Soldiers poured into the station, securing the HFY warriors and freeing the survivors. Medical teams rushed to help the wounded. Mira found Thesik lying where he had fallen. His old body was broken, but he was still alive. Barely. She knelt beside him, tears streaming down her face. She told him to hold on. She said that help was coming. Thesik smiled weakly. He told her that he was proud of her. He said that he had known from the first day what she was capable of. He had just been waiting for her to discover herself. The medical team arrived and took him away. They said his chances were not good. They would do everything they could. The broadcast ended with images of the freed prisoners, the captured HFY, and one small human girl sitting alone in the cargo bay, finally allowing herself to cry. In the weeks that followed, the footage of that day was replayed more times than any recording in galactic history. The human girl became a symbol on hundreds of worlds. Her face appeared in artwork, and her words were quoted in speeches. This survived. His recovery was slow, but his spirit remained strong. He told everyone who would listen about the girl, would save them all. Mira was offered medals and titles and positions of power. She turned most of them down. She did not want to be a symbol. She just wanted to be herself. But she did accept one offer. Ambassador Vorthkin personally sponsored a scholarship for her to study engineering at the Galactic Academy. He said it was the least he could do for someone who had taught him what courage really looked like. Months later, Mira walked through the rebuilt corridors of the station. It looked almost the same as before, but everything felt different. Species who had never noticed her now nodded with respect as she passed. Some even spoke her name. Pip walked beside her, his fur bright and his eyes happy. He had become her closest friend, the brother she had never had. He still could not believe that the girl who had secretly helped him had become a legend. Near the entrance, a new group of students arrived for the semester. Young beings from across the galaxy, full of excitement and nervousness. One of them, a large Krelix, accidentally bumped into a human custodian and walked on without noticing. Mira stopped. She helped the custodian pick up his dropped tools and gave him a warm smile. He thanked her quietly, surprised that anyone had noticed him at all. Pip asked her why she always did that, why she still helped people when she did not have to. Myra looked up at the stars visible through the station's windows. She remembered her grandmother's words about kindness being the only strength that mattered. She said that the galaxy had always measured strength by size and power. They counted weapons and armies and territory, but they had never thought to measure a heart. She smiled and continued walking. That was why they had never seen humans coming.